Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about the struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Kristina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Kristina Schmitt. So you've set your goals, you've got everything aligned for the year, and everybody knows what they should be doing. And then 3 months later, you realize no one's worked on anything. 6 months later, you still haven't moved off the dime. And finally, at the end of the year comes, you didn't get there. What happened? I see this time and time again. I know I fell prey to it as a leader myself. And the reality is that we get so much on our plate. We get things happening. They're coming at us from various places. We've got problems. We've got new things that come up from a different boss. We have something coming. And what happens is we don't check in on those goals that we set at the right cadence. We don't talk about them enough because the reality is that people work on what their bosses talk about. When something is important, we talk about it all the time. We check in on it. We're working on it. Everything is aligned to it. And when we set these annual goal plans, these strategy sessions, all of this stuff that we spend all of this time at the end of the year and the beginning of the year setting, we set these things. We want to take on the world. We want to take on this huge amount of things. If we did all of those things, it would be wonderful and fantastic. But the reality is that there are so many hours in a day. There are things that we have to do day to day to keep things moving. And then things come up. And while we have these great intentions, we end up following up on the latest fire or the latest quality issue or the latest new thing that came up that we had to do because of, maybe there's a new government policy you had to implement. So we end up following up on these things and we don't adjust out. We don't change our goals and we end up following up on and talking about and paying attention to these things that weren't in our initial plan. So what I want to talk about and help you with is to come up with a very practical way to follow up on what's important so you make sure that you're getting things done, you're moving things forward, and you're getting to where you want to be. So I'm calling this how to follow up on your goals. So the first thing, before we even get to following up, we need to make sure that we've set them appropriately. So everybody's heard, or most of us have heard of the acronym, the SMART goals. We're really just leaning into that. So we're being very specific about what we want to do. We're making sure we're tracking it so it's measurable, know when we're going to get there. And so, sometimes it's a little bit wishy-washy. So again, not just tracking numbers, but also tracking, did we solve the problem we had? Are we seeing the results we expected to see when we accomplished or when we did this goal? So we also need to make sure they're agreed upon. So agreed upon with the team, they're agreed upon with corporate entity, whatever that might be, any other stakeholders we have. So they're agreed upon because when they're agreed upon, that's how we ensure that they're important and relevant. I'm going to get to this part a little bit more in a moment. So we're SMA, then R is realistic. So we're not trying to take on the entire world all at the same time in 5 different areas. So realistic, can we actually do it? Does it seem reasonable we'll get there? So understanding where we are today and then where we can actually get to and putting the appropriate time and energy and horsepower towards that. So, resources of time, money, people power, whatever you need. And then finally, time constraint. So when are we going to get it? When are we going to get it by? So what by when, very specifically. And the other part of this that maybe doesn't come out as well when we say SMART, we maybe allude to it and agreed upon, but I can say yes and agree with a whole bunch of ideas at the same time. But the reality is, how many can I realistically move forward? So there is an element of focus that we oftentimes forget because we want to take on all these things and everybody's minds work differently. But I know my mind in particular, and there are other people like me in the world, my mind in particular feels like, yeah, that shouldn't be so hard. We just do this, this, and this, right? Like I don't like to pay attention to the details and sometimes forget about how involved things are. Just to give an example, I am looking at doing some small renovations, like doing something as simple as taking wallpaper off of a wall and painting the room. Sounds simple, right? We take the wallpaper off in an evening because it's only on one wall and clean the walls and paint. Straightforward. But then you start talking about the details of it and like, oh, if you gouge the wall or if things get stuck, now you got to sand that down and you're going to have to fix this and fill this hole in and do this. And I'm like, so all these little things that come up when you're taking on a project, something so small as painting one small bedroom, now take it to a whole system you're implementing. What could go wrong? What little details will come up that maybe you didn't think of in the big, huge planning portion of it? So there are contingencies that we have to put into place. So there are elements of complexity that we might not see that are going to take more time and energy and resources than we originally put in. So then again, when we don't focus our time and energy on the most important thing right now, then we get very distracted. We work on a lot of things. We're very busy. But when we look back at the year, we didn't get to where we wanted to be. We didn't get as much accomplished, or maybe we didn't get anything accomplished. We spent the year fighting fires and, taking 2 steps out of the 20 that we needed to take towards the project because we took 2 steps in 10 different projects. So this element of focus becomes such a huge part and such an important part to our ability to follow up and to follow up appropriately and ultimately to have our team respond to that follow-up. I want you to put yourself in the position of you are an employee, you have 5 big goals for the year. They seem reasonable if you had nothing else to do. But the fact is you do. You have a job, you have roles that take an obscene amount of your time. So what you've done is you've committed to 5 things in theory that are going to get worked on. But the fact is that while they were nice to do, maybe they weren't the most important thing for you to be doing. Maybe the goal should have been resolving something that comes up super often as a fire instead of the thing that moves you forward. So when we talk about improvements, we all have a standard. So we have a standard at which we believe we should be operating at. Sometimes we're performing below the standard, and the goal, while it might not be exciting or where we want to be, but the goal needs to be mapped out around how to get to the standard or get closer to the standard. Once we're operating at the standard, now we can look at how do we move above the standard or move the standard up. And that's where we get to how we look at our problems and how we look at our goal setting and making sure they're realistic and we're working on the thing that's most important right now. So let's focus a little bit more on that. When I talk about the word focus, so I had a boss who used to like to say, by definition, you can only focus on one thing at a time. And yet in business, in life, we do have many plates spinning in the air and many balls in the air, whatever analogy you want to use. We have many of those going at the same time. So we have to maintain things, but then there is an element of focus for improvement. So whether we're going from below standard to standard or from the standard to creating the new standard or going above the standard, we need to make sure we're focused on that and we have our time and energy focused there. So if we say we're only focusing on one thing at a time, we are saying that this one thing that we're going to do is going to be the most important thing that we're going to use to move ourselves ahead. And this becomes hugely important when we talk about follow-up. Because when we're talking about, you're going to have your weekly meeting with your team. When you come in, what are you going to talk about? You're going to talk about probably the fires that are happening or the things that are preventing you from making the monthly targets, making the revenue goal that you needed, or the customer concern that came up. You're going to talk about the things that are important. And if you're not removing those roadblocks, and if your other things are not related to making things better for your company, then you're not going to talk about it, or it's going to be a very small portion of the very big meeting. And that's not okay. So you need to be focused around and rallied around the most important thing right now. So if you're in a business and you're making decent money, you're meeting your goals, but you've got something new coming on the horizon. All right, it might come at the end of the year. So the most important thing right now might seem to be preparing for that, but you also might have something that's getting in the way of you preparing for that. So while you might be preparing for it, all you're doing is stacking on. So what you have to do is you say, yes, this is the big thing that's most important right now, but we have to focus wholeheartedly on removing this roadblock, on how do we get through this area to make sure that we can remove that and then work on the thing that's coming. It's just about getting everybody rallied around that same thing. So now how does that work when we're talking about personal things? So one-on-one goals. So if you've listened to me talk about coaching sessions before, you're going to come away from most coaching sessions with some kind of an activity to do, usually, because usually those are about how do we remove the roadblock that's getting in the way of this person operating at their best. So these goals might be something technical. They might be something related to the business, but they also might be something that's more related to that person, this person that you're working with, right? Your team member. So they're still just as important because those things are important to be there. So you've got to come up with a way and a rhythm that you're going to continue to talk about things and keep them relevant for everybody. So there's some tips here beyond the SMART, right? So agreeing to them, obviously that's within the SMART. But one of the biggest thing is writing them down. So whether it is a coaching session one-on-one or a big group team meeting that, you say you're going to go do that thing, either way, you have to write it down. What I do is I keep coaching notes, and the last thing that's on every single one is here's your follow-up actions. And then that's the first thing you check in on when you come back. And you do a little, how are you? Is everything going well? What's going well today? That kind of a check-in. But the first thing you do is follow up on the commitments from the last time. So that keeps it relevant. You've written it down and you're talking about it. So those are kind of like those two huge things. And if it's a big group team meeting, if you've got a project you're working on, it should be in some action follow-up notes. So you might have a huge action tracker. My project management folks, you guys will have all your different ways, but ultimately you have to have actions to follow up upon, and you have to write them down so that they stay relevant to everybody. So you're going to talk about them at the beginning again of the next time you're together. Did you follow up on, did you do the thing that you were meant to do? I have seen that part of a meeting take ages. So I'm going to come back to focus. If you are in a meeting where you are following up on a whole bunch of actions and it takes you the whole meeting to do so, to report back on, did you do what you said you were going to do before? I am going to take a wild guess and say that people did not do what they said they were going to do before. It would be beneficial at that point to stop the meeting and say, everybody go do the things that you were meant to do between then and now. Go get them done, and we'll have this meeting again tomorrow at the same time. You need to start to show that you're serious and that things have to get done. So if things are not getting done in your business and your team, you've got to start making that important. And that is the biggest part of following up, is talking about it. So we write it down and we talk about it. Okay. And there's a tracking element with that writing it down part as well, but making sure that it stays relevant. So now again, back to focus, we, especially when there's a lot happening, might get into scope creep. I've seen it happen both at the beginning of projects, middle of projects, ends of projects, personal development, implementing a new system, whatever it might be. That scope creep is bad. So while we might want to do everything, you can only focus on this thing. So some great little questions to ask yourself are, is this added action getting us to where we said we were going to be? Or is it getting us beyond? Or is it creeping out too far? Because while we might want to make it absolutely amazing and perfect at the end of the first round, that's not the important part. The important part is get the thing done. Let's move it forward, and then we can implement the improvements afterward. So staying focused on what the expected outcomes that we wanted to see from when we set the goal is hugely critical to keeping it relevant, keeping us focused around the same things and following up. So let's come up into reality. What do you do? Let's say you're in this position right now. You've got a boatload of things that you wanted to get accomplished this year, and you are feeling a bit overwhelmed already, and it's like end of January, right? So you're feeling overwhelmed that you have too many things, lots of projects, plus still like the day-to-day running of the business. I want you to take your team, or if it's just you, take yourself. And I do benefit from other people, but sometimes you can't find them. So if you can find another person who will sit there and brain dump with you, then, to do this activity with you, then do it. But I want you to brain dump everything onto a piece of paper, or ideally a flip chart or a whiteboard. So everything that you think you should be doing, just brain dump it all out there. And then at this point, start to take the question and start to do elimination. What's the most important thing? Okay, so is this like, obviously you have to follow up on orders. Is there a problem around that? Is there a project around it? Or is that just a day-to-day? So like just start cutting out hacking and slashing, that sort of stuff. And get yourself down to a short list. So like 5 things max. Okay, so these are the things we think might be the most important thing for us right now. So once you get to that, I want you to do a discernment process and start to ask yourself a few questions. So it's a list of 3 questions. 3 questions and then an action to go do it. So the first question is, what benefit will I see if I do this right now? So get as detailed as you can in this description of what benefits you might see and list that all out there. Then secondly, what happens if I don't do this right now? So basically, what's the risk if I don't accomplish this thing right now? Okay, well, the part's going to launch and we are not going to be able to do it. So big, right? Maybe. And then what's getting in the way of me being able to do this right now? Or what's the prerequisite might be another way to look at that. So you can eliminate things because maybe the order is wrong. So once you go through those 3 questions, you should be able to, through some discussion and discernment with your team, come up with what's the most important thing right now. So now we have this focus. And it should be like a bigger chunk of a focus. So like if I say I need to get my CRM sorted out or something like that, that's not really that big. So maybe we need to expand it a bit because we're thinking like a time frame of a project that might be 3 to 6 months. Right? Or 6 to 9 months kind of range. So like, what's the big focus for right now? Where are we really aiming at? And then pick that one thing that is, the right scope. So the 3 to 9 month range, as well as the most important thing. So high risk if you don't do it, high benefit if you do it, and the next right step thing to be done. So then from there, you've got this bigger focus. Now, what are the chunks of work that need to get done to work on it? And then what are those micro steps that then need to be worked upon and who's going to do it? So this is just a great way to stay focused and to stay all aligned in one thing. So what that means is that if you have a new product launch coming up and you're thinking about changing over systems, like a complete change of maybe your ERP system or your whole financial scope system that runs everything in the business, maybe that's not a good time. So it's probably not a good time to be creating and launching a new part as it is to be doing the system changeover. You've got to figure out based on your business and what's important, what needs to get done by when. What's the most important right now? How do we do this in a way? Because this is a big amount of horsepower that takes the entire team to do both of these huge, large things. And it doesn't make sense to be doing them with like both at the same time because they're going to deter from one another. So back to the follow-up point. If everything is relevant and you're very focused, everybody's talking about the same thing, follow-up becomes more natural. Because what you're doing is you're talking about what's important. You're talking about what's getting in the way of what's most important. And you're doing those very logistical things of writing it down and talking about it at the next time you schedule to speak about it or to speak to that person again. So this just becomes a rhythm and a pattern. It's going to feel maybe challenging if you're not doing it from the get-go or if you're not doing it today. But once you start to get to that rhythm, okay, we're closing out the meeting. What are we doing before the next meeting? And then at the beginning of the meeting, okay, before, from the last meeting, here's our follow-up. Boom, 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 boom. These are just very easy ways to do that. And in the same way that we have these day-to-day things that we have to do. And again, if we're focused on what's most important and we're staying relevant and focused and we make sure our actions and our plans and our development plans even are focused on the big, what's most important right now, that follow-up will become easier. So to wrap it up, what it really comes down to is most of us are trying to do everything at the same time, and we can't. We will benefit tremendously if we can stay focused on the one most important thing. If we're focused for really hardcore for a month on one little thing and then can get it off our plate so that we can focus really hard on the next thing for the next month or 3 months or whatever it might be, that is going to get us so much farther than saying, well, it's all important and I better just do 2 things here and 2 things here and 3 things here. And then you never get it done. And you're in this world of overwhelm. Your team, when they're followed up with, they're saying, I don't know what's most important because everything seems to be important. So when we can help ourselves by staying focused on the most important thing, we're helping our team and we're overall helping the business because we're moving it forward. While that one little project might feel like it's super important to get done right this instant, there are the 3 other projects that have to get done in advance of that. And when we can accomplish those, and then in 6 months, we're going to get the other one done, we're still ahead of the game. We've moved our business forward. We've made progress, and we've kept our team aligned around what's most important. And that makes it just that much easier to follow up on. And most importantly, get our goals done just get our goals done, period. So if you found this episode helpful today, please like it, share it with a friend, leave some comments on the YouTube, and just really take it away and use it. That is what I want for you. So thank you again for listening, and I will see you on the next episode of the Business Building Blocks podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business Building Blocks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you found value in our conversation, please leave a quick review, like, or share. It helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. For more resources and insights, visit KristinaSchmitt.ca, where you can find tools and support to empower your leadership journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.